You were keeping him out.
Come in to do the concert, and it went all the way to the Court of Appeal, and I won. I made him stay out. I was like, no, Mr. Dog, you cannot come in.
This is Unlawful.
Welcome to Unlawful. As always, I'm Brandon Renken, and today with me is one of my oldest friends, Alice Clark-Platts. Alice is a former lawyer, some would say recovering lawyer, and current fiction author whose recent book, The Cove, is available on all platforms. I haven't caught up with The Cove, but I've read the others, and I'm just so impressed.
Thank you. That's cool.
Before we get into what you're doing now, though, I wanted to talk a little bit about your prior life, because before you were just a writer, right? You were just a lawyer. And my recollection is that you were a human rights lawyer. Is that right?
Yeah, although I started working in the City of London. So I did my training contract at Herbert Smith, which is now Herbert Smith Free Hills, I believe. I don't know, in my past life. So I started off doing a sort of kind of corporate training contract. And I did that for 2 years and I qualified there. And then I moved to work for the government legal service of the UK government. And I worked in the immigration department for the UK government, quite controversially. And
For sure.
I also did judicial review. I worked in that department. It's sort of public and administrative law. And during that time, I did a master's at the London School of Economics in human rights law. And that's how I got into working. At that time, human rights was kind of really in the forefront of law. This is going back a while. Everybody was bringing cases against the government, I should say, under the Human Rights Act in the UK. And so I was basically, I mean, I say I was a human rights lawyer, it makes it sound like I was a kind of freedom fighter, but actually I was defending the government.
So you were defending the government, saying, no, all this terrible stuff we do to humans is not bad.
Yeah, although secretly what I did, I kind of found quite a niche area in immigration. So I, where people were coming to the country and they were seeking asylum, I was, and if they'd met up with somebody who was resident here and then they were having children in the country, I kind of got a niche area of law where the child then was sort of, nobody knew what would happen to the child if then they wanted to deport the parents back to their country of origin.
Gotcha.
And so I would take the case of the child, and there were lots of cases to do with that, and it kind of got stuck between the family courts and the immigration courts, and there was this kind of lacuna of law that nobody really understood what to do with. And I took those cases on, and that became my kind of like area of expertise. That was to do with human rights, and I was like working within, I was a bit of a mole in the government trying to do right for those kids, despite being, working for the government. I was sort of working for the children, really.
You did a case that involved Snoop Dogg maybe at one time.
Yeah.
And there was also one that was even more interesting to me after our mutual time in South Africa. You had a case with Winnie Mandela as well.
Yeah,
right?
Again, both of those were immigration cases. So it sounds as if I was kind of rubbing shoulders with both of those people, which sadly was not the case. Snoop Dogg particularly, just because that would have been quite glam. But no, he was just trying to come into the UK to do a concert, and he'd been in a fracas at Heathrow Airport, and the UK government, in their particularly kind of like annoying, like we don't want anyone to have fun kind of a way, just said he can't come in to do this concert. And
something in the back of my head, even when I read it, suggested that maybe there was a pot issue or something.
No,
like
I think
that,
he just,
with respect
him
to
and his
but
bodyguards just had a massive old fisticuffs fight at Heathrow Airport, and he got given a caution by the police. And then when he tried to come back in to do a concert, they said, you can't come in and do a concert. And
So did you save the day? Did he get to do the concert?
no, Brandon, I was Mrs. I'm so sorry.
You were keeping him out.
Come in to do the concert, and it went all the way to the Court of Appeal, and I won. I made him stay out. I was like, no, Mr. Dog, you cannot come in. And and then I moved to Singapore, which is when I finally stopped becoming a lawyer. And then he eventually won. because I left.
I want to ask you what your unlawful moment is, but I also want to understand how you became an author. And I think there's a distinct possibility that those two things might be intertwined.
All the time that I was doing this work and all the time that I was being a lawyer, and I did actually love being a lawyer and I loved being a litigator and I loved doing this work and it was really, really interesting.
So you're one of those people that people hate, who loved everything about their job, was massively successful, and then decided to do something completely aspirational and totally different and loves that too. Great.
No, there is a lot of woe and tragedy also in my life.
So easy to relate to.
You can go into if you really want, but I'm here to tell you the happy side of things.
Sure.
But all alongside this, doing the masters and blah, 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 I was kind of scribbling down this story that I had come up with.
And this would become Bitter Fruits?
No, this book has never been published.
Okay, gotcha.
But the idea was that the UK and all countries around the world had shut their borders and there were no flights allowed anywhere because of terrorism. Every country in the world had shut their borders. And so each country had to develop a super army to defend its borders. And my hero was a government lawyer, wonder where I got that idea from, who'd come up with this idea that they wanted to develop this super army. They couldn't get people to sign up for it because they just were scared that they were going to get killed. So the only thing that they could think of doing was to basically have a lottery that said 1 in every 10 babies that was born was going to be taken from its parents and it was going to be brought into this super army. And the government lawyer was married to a woman who, oh dear, got pregnant, and her baby gets picked in the super lottery. She goes on the run with the baby because she's like, there's no way she's giving up her baby, but she can't leave the country because the borders are closed. So I wrote this whole book and I sent it to an agent. An agent took me on and she said she loved it. And then everybody said, oh, it's too unbelievable. No countries will ever shut their borders. And then 2020 COVID happened and everyone shut their borders.
Right. So, but that got your foot in the door, right? Was that, and I'm just going to ask you, was that realizing that you could write something and have somebody appreciate it, even though it didn't get picked up? Was that your unlawful moment, or is your unlawful moment when you finally wrote that book that somebody was like, okay, we're going to publish this?
Yeah, I guess my unlawful moment was that I was busy writing that in court when I should have been listening to my cases. And I remember sitting at my desk in London and actually in court. I mean, I do remember doing this and scribbling in longhand and on my computer and kind of minimizing my screen when my boss would walk past. And I had written like paragraphs and I'd written scenes and chapters and stuff. And I had a whole bunch of material when I should have been working. I should have been focusing on my job. It was okay because at the same time I'd written another book. So that was so they went for that one instead. So I had two options.
Before I let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us about your new book. What's the new story?
Okay, so The Cove, is set on a little island, little archipelago off Malaysia. And it is about two expat British couples who go on a long weekend away with their young children, and they live in Singapore, so they're fully expat, and then they go for a long weekend up to this beautiful tropical paradise island for a long weekend, thinking that they're going to have this idyllic weekend away. And then unfortunately one night they get a bit too drunk, and one of the husbands gets into a sort of bit of a spat with one of the local communities, and then he gets into a fight with his wife, and then he gets into a kayak around sort of 4 a.m. and goes off into the ocean, and then he is not to be found the next day. And so the hunt is on for him, at which point a monsoon rolls in, and so the Coast Guard can't reach them, nobody can leave the island, and that's when everything starts to go wrong.
Everything turns upside down. Well, I'm very excited to read it. Alice, I really appreciate you taking the time. That's Unlawful.
Thanks.